Hi, this is Eric from longboxreview.com. Welcome to the show and welcome to my 10th anniversary celebratory episode. So, 10 years of podcasting. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I started podcasting because I wanted to try it out. I wanted to, extend the experience I was having at the blog, writing about comic books, but I wanted to have conversations with people, and that was my original vision of the show. It wasn't just me on a mic like today, where I'm talking at you about things, giving you my insights, my perspective. I really wanted to develop something along the lines of, something like CGS. So that's really what inspired me to do this, and I've mentioned this on the show before. CGS and other comic book related podcasts, but it was mostly CGS that got me started. Although I will admit that my very first concept for a podcast was actually myself and my daughter Brittany doing a Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode discussion show, because we were both very much into that show then. And there was another show that I listened to, and I've forgotten the name of it now, but it was these two guys doing the same thing. And I thought, oh, well, we would do a better job, and getting a younger person's perspective, a young woman, her perspective on Buffy, I thought would be a great idea. But I could not convince my daughter to do it, even though I spent months trying to convince her to do it. She was like, "Dad, no, I'm not doing this." So I moved on and decided to take what I was doing for the blog, and instead of writing about comic books, I would talk about them, which is kind of a weird thing for me because growing up, I was shy, extremely shy. I would not talk. I would not even look people in the eye when they spoke to me, which is ironic considering that this is something that I've told my kids and now my grandkids, when people talk to you, look at them, respond, engage. So I just always found that funny that I ended up not only podcasting, but I've taken on positions of management where I have to speak to and deal with people one-on-one. And so, yeah, it's weird, but to think back on that. But anyway, when I decided to do the podcast, though, especially the comic book thing, I spent almost a year researching how to do it. How best to do it? How do others do it? My wife even bought me one Father's Day a book that was basically a how-to book on podcasting at that time, which there weren't that many back then. Most information was kind of online, I guess. I think I even contacted. I sent an email to CGS. I think. I don't remember now. It might have been a post at the forums as well. I don't recall now, but I remember getting some information. I might have even gotten some information from Peter Rios, who was the co-founder of CGS and now the Legion Project co-host and frequent guest on the show too. Anyway, but I wanted to understand. That's kind of how I approach things that I'm doing. I want to absorb all the knowledge that I can, and then figure out how best to do something, do it my way. And boy, it's been a learning experience. I had, no money, virtually no money, and a lot of ignorance. So those first few episodes were really rough from a technical standpoint because of the equipment I was using. I've since, of course, gotten better equipment. I went from a headset mic, like a $15 headset mic that I bought at Walmart over about 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, to now I have, this is ridiculous. I have 3 microphones, 3 XLR microphones, USB/XLR microphones. 2 of them are the ATR 2100. I bought the first one, of course, and that's what I used a lot once I got that mic. I bought another one as a backup, and then I found out about the Q2U USB mic, which is a much better mic, and now I just need to get rid of the ATRs and buy another Q2U. Along the way, also my wife, my beautiful, lovely wife, who has always supported my hobbies, having to do with comic books and how much money I spend every month on comic books, but also the podcast as well. She bought me a Zoom microphone. In fact, she has purchased 2 of them for me. She got me the Zoom H1, which I broke eventually, trying to do a firmware update. That's not the first time I've broken a piece of equipment that my wife bought me as a gift because of a firmware update. God, there's got to be a better way to do those. Anyway, then she also got me the Zoom H4n, which I have been using for the majority of the time to record my solo podcasts, and also to record the conversations I have with my co-hosts over Skype. So once I figured out how to get Skype into the recorder and for me to record into the recorder and everybody can hear each other, which is referred to as Mix Minus. There's a show called, I think, Podcast Helper, or I'm sorry, the Podcaster Studio, that showed me how to do that. And the guy who runs that show, Ray Ortega, I believe is his name, put out a YouTube video showing how to do that exactly with the equipment that I use. Well, the Zoom anyway. And then here recently, within the last few months of this recording, I found the Zoom H6 on sale. And I had some extra money, so I bought it, and I've been using that. And it's been a bit of a struggle. It works fantastic for when I record by myself. The audio coming from my Q2U with an XLR connection into it is fantastic. However, I've discovered with a Legion Project episode that I recorded with Peter that the Mix Minus coming from Skype is not the best. But fortunately, I have other means. I have audio software that helps make the audio sound a little better. Thank God. Boy, that was a good almost 2 weeks where I was figuratively pulling my hair out, trying to figure out what to do. I think I've figured out how best to approach this. But anyway, that is neither here nor there. I'm boring you already with all my podcast insider stuff. Anyway, back to the history of the show. Like I said, once I figured out what I was going to do, I decided, okay, I'm actually going to record, and so I took that crappy headset mic and recorded my first episode, which I release, and it's still in the feed as episode 0. Where I talk about a Brave and the Bold issue featuring the Legion of Superheroes. The last volume of Brave and the Bold, not the original volume of Brave and the Bold. So, and then once I got that done, and I had figured out how to take an audio file that I recorded on my computer using Audacity to turn that into an MP3 file, because I read that that's what you do, and then I had to figure out where to host it, where to post it, how to get people to it so that they can listen to it. And before I joined a podcast file host service, I put it out on Microsoft's SkyDrive, which later became OneDrive, and then would post a link to like on Twitter and stuff, for people to go and listen to it. And unfortunately, that link for some reason did not always work for people, and it was different. I don't know. There was something weird about it, or I couldn't figure it out. But anyway, that caused me to actually go spend some money And so that's like I said, I went to, or started using Podbean's hosting service because they were cheap. There was a free version, but I decided to, shortly after I joined, I decided to opt for, I forget, whatever their lowest. I can't remember how much it was now. It was pretty cheap though. So I started putting episodes there and found my host and started posting them to the blog. I think I was still on Google's Blogspot at the time when I started that, or maybe that's when I transitioned over to WordPress to host the Longbox Review blog. It's become a blur. I don't remember now. I think it was that I had started the WordPress blog before I actually posted any podcast episodes. Anyway, doesn't matter. And then later, I had read many times that Libsyn was actually the better service. They'd been around longer. There was some things in the podcast verse about Podbean and its customer service that I wasn't liking, and so I decided to switch over to Libsyn. And at the time, I got a better deal out of Libsyn, and then Podbean changed their pricing stuff. And I know people still use Podbean as a hosting service, and there's like a bajillion of them. And, maybe not so many, but there are far more than when I started out, as far as I know. So yeah, that's kind of the genesis of the show. But even though like the first few episodes was just me talking into a microphone, and like I said, boy, those were rough. And then episode 4 happened, and this is really the start of the show. It took 5 episodes, counting the episode 0, for the show to be what I thought I wanted it to be. And that's when I had my good buddy Travis come join me on the show, and we had a discussion about him, about comic books, about stuff relating to that. And I had the best time. In fact, I, to this day, remember having this conversation with Travis and being so excited and happy that I was having this conversation with him, one of my oldest friends, my second oldest friend in the world. And because I've known him since the end of the 8th grade. So, middle school. Anyway, we've been friends a long time. So having him on the show was fantastic. And then when I was editing it, I was messaging him saying how much fun it was to do the editing. And boy, did that change. Because I hate editing now, no matter who I have on the show. If I could afford to pay somebody to do this, I would. Nah, probably not, because I'm too much of a control freak, and I want to control how I sound. So when I edit, so for anybody who's listening who has been on the show, I rarely edit you as a co-host. Most of the editing that I do has to do with my crappy voice and the clicking noises my mouth makes, and all the times I say or what are the phrases that I'm sure you guys have gotten tired of hearing me say. So, but anyway, things like those crappy transitions. I still do them. I try to cut out a lot of them. I don't cut out everything because it's part of the conversation, or part of what I'm saying. It flows better if I just leave it. Things like that. But anyway, yeah, I had a great time talking with Travis, and then we had a series of discussions. I'll talk about those a little just a second, but that's really the vision I had for the show, was bring on my friends, bring in other people that I would discover and get to know, and that has happened. I've met and had many people now on the show. It hasn't always been that I have gotten to know them because of the show. There are other reasons why I've gotten to know people, but had them on the show, and that's been wonderful too. So even though, like I said, even though I like getting on here and doing the solo podcaster thing and just talking about comics from my perspective, it's those conversations I've had. If you've noticed or maybe even listened to the 10 retrosodes that I've been releasing over the last few months to celebrate this occasion, this 10th anniversary of mine, 6 of the 10 of those featured co-hosts. So that tells you something. At least 60% of the time, I prefer talking with other people, if my math is right. While I was putting together those retrosodes, the 10 for 10 years, I had a long list of potential episodes that I obviously couldn't include. I couldn't include all of them. But of those potential episodes, they were, the majority of them were, the vast majority of them were conversations with other people. Like I said, with Travis, once we had our initial conversations, we did several episodes, and this was just, the timing at the time is when DC was going to do the New 52 and relaunch their entire line in their universe. So we got many episodes out of that, including coming back, I think 6 months later to do a retrospective on them. We, more recently in the last couple years, we've been doing more Breaking Late news episodes that became a regular feature, but then work got in the way, first with Travis and then myself. And other discussions, including one of my very favorites. We did a top 5 Magic characters episode, and not only was that just a great conversation, I enjoyed the top 5 stuff. CGS does that a lot, and other podcasts do that as well. But I haven't done too many of those top 5 things, which I should rectify. But anyway, I got to do that with one of my best friends, and he actually came to the house in my office, my basement office, to record. It was fantastic, and I wish we could do that again. Speaking of old friends, my oldest friend, Greg, he and I had a conversation, I think it was our first on the show, talking about the first Avengers movie. And that was a lot of fun. So, Greg and I had, and I'm sure I'm repeating myself. If you listen to those episodes, I'm repeating some things that I said on those episodes. But Greg and I remember us talking about how cool it would be to see these comic book characters come to life in movies. And then, almost 40 years later, here is the Avengers on the big screen. So I thought that was a great conversation. And then we had another episode where we just had comic book related movie and TV talk, and that was supposed to become a more regular feature on the show, but it didn't quite materialize, again because we both have our lives and work, and Greg's a very busy guy. He runs his own business now, and so he just doesn't have much time. But I would love to have him back on the show to talk about other things as well. Let's see. I had a conversation with Mike, who was the first person to leave an iTunes review. So I wanted to have him on the show, and that was great. It was like talking to Greg or Travis, like this old friend who where we had a lot of things in common. And I've had other conversations like that as well. I'll talk about those later. Well, speaking of George from the Meanwhile at the Podcast show these days, before it was the George and Tony Entertainment Show. I don't recall how we got together, but I think maybe he reached out to me, and I was on his show several times. He's been on mine, doing the previews episodes. But I remember that first conversation we had. It was, again, like 2 old friends getting together to chat about comic books and pop culture stuff, and it was fantastic. And through George, I was able to connect with Greg Schiegel, who is the cartoonist for a couple books called Pix. They're great books. He's also done some other comic book work, including SpongeBob SquarePants, I believe, and other things he's working on. And I that was a great conversation. That was my first with a comic book creator. And also through George, because of his social media savvy, that got the attention of the Rough Riders creative team. And so we talked to those guys, which was like this whirlwind. It was like being caught in a tornado. That conversation. But I shouldn't say we, I don't know how George was feeling about it, but after that happened, and then George and I got back together to do the introduction to the show, and also to do a post conversation after our talk with the crew. It was, I had so much nervous energy and excitement, and it was just an experience I will never forget. I've also talked to a fellow Idahoan, Sean. He contacted me, letting me know that he enjoyed the show, and invited him on to talk with him. And again, that was another conversation, like two geeks getting together and talking about their love of comics. And then I had him on a previous episode once, so I'd love all these people I'm mentioning. I would love to talk to them again. Another case in point is comic book blogger James Blundell. I talked with him and his comic book collaborator Ayowadi Abobaran about their short comic, The Hipster Beard. And James lives in England, and Ayowadi was I can't remember which country now. And so that was a lot of fun to coordinate these two gentlemen over different time zones. I took a day off to do that episode. That's not the last time I've done that. Anyway, James and I have a tentative plan to do another episode together. So I need to, actually two. I don't know if James, if you're listening, we talked about doing 2 different episodes. I will get to these. I promise. All the people that I've contacted in the last 6 months, or maybe even more, I do plan to have you back on the show. I really do. I sincerely do. Speaking of, there's Damien. We were supposed to record some stuff. I just haven't gotten around to it. But I have really enjoyed my conversations with Damien. Not just on the podcast and on YouTube, but he lives in Portland. We have attended 2 or 3 Rose City Comic Cons where we would get together and go to panels together and talk about stuff. He's had me over to his house for dinner a couple times during the con. I mean, he's a great guy, and he has this wonderful perspective and this knowledge of history about comic books that I absolutely adore. And so people should go listen to his show on YouTube. Like I said, we've had conversations about Rose City Comic Con, but the last couple times that we were there, Damien and Matt, both of whom do the Never Stay Dead podcast, those two and I would go to this bar in downtown Portland. I think it's downtown. It's in Portland, McMiniman's, and I brought my recorder and I set it up, and we'd sit there and record and talk about the con and drink. And I loved those times. So hopefully the pandemic eventually works itself out and cons can be a thing again. Although, boy, I have to say I don't know. I don't know now what I'm going to do about that, if anything. Right now, going to a con is a big no, so I don't know. I'll have to figure that out, I guess. Speaking of cons, I would often have my now teenage granddaughters, Gabby and Maddie. We would mostly do this on YouTube, where we would record and show and talk about the things that we all purchased at the cons. And so some of those things I would turn into podcast episodes as well, audio podcast episodes. So I've always enjoy those discussions. And then in 2018, like I said, this whole thing started with this idea of getting together with my daughter and recording stuff. And then in 2018, I was able to convince my wife to join me along with Gabby and Maddie, and we did a Gutters episode where we talked about our favorite things about Christmas. And that's one of my favorite things I've ever done, is to talk with all three of them about stuff. The only thing that would have made it even better, even more perfect, was if I could get my daughter to join, to join me. So, but that hasn't happened yet. And then finally, I mentioned Peter earlier. He's been a frequent co-host. We've talked about various titles: Lazarus, Secret Identities, Rachel Rising, and just, theater talk. I love theater, and Peter works in that area. And so it's always great to hear an insider's view of theater stuff. And of course, there's the Legion Project. That was his idea to do this show and to focus on Volume 3 of the Legion of Superheroes. I think mostly because I had not read a good chunk of that. And so we decided to get together and do an episode, you ever get tired of podcasters confusing episode and issue? It just slips out, guys. But to do an issue by issue examination of that series. So, I find it kind of funny that, it started out basically with Peter, and here I am 10 years later, still doing stuff with him. So I consider all of these people that I've talked to be friends, and we may not be the closest of friends, but I have an affection for everyone that I've talked to. So it's been a great 10 years having all these conversations with all these people. But overall, it's been these conversations I've had with all of you. Even though you may not have been on the show, I am having a conversation with you, or, I guess grammatically at you, towards you, to you. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for those that have participated, especially, and those of you who have engaged with me, either through voicemail, email, the reviews on iTunes, social media. It's been so much fun talking with people over the years, and getting to know different perspectives and getting recommendations. And it's always, of course, nice to hear that people think I'm doing a good job, or at least I'm providing some sort of entertainment or some sort of service relating to comic books, the medium that I love, I adore so much. I love it so much that I'm going to die in a paper avalanche one day because I've got so much stuff here in my office. God, I hope that doesn't happen. That'd be a horrible way to go. But anyway, speaking of engagement, I put a call out here on the show, in the podcast feed, and then also on the blog through social media, asking for your questions. And I got a lot. So that's the rest of this episode, boys and girls. It is the Longbox Review 10-year anniversary Q&A. All right. So I've got a bunch of things here. We'll just get through them. Get through them. It sounds like a chore. No, we will celebrate by answering these questions. I'm going to start off with, from Twitter, Sergeant America, who's someone, Sarge, if you're listening, I would love to have you on the show sometime. I find Sarge's, his wit on Twitter to be delightful. He's a funny guy, and I can only imagine he'd be a great co-host. So he starts off with, do you answer rhetorical questions? And then his second question, if you wrote your dream comic, who would you get on art? Ooh, that is, man, I'll tell you what, I am horrible at those kinds of questions. Who would you get to do X? Who's your dream cast for this? Things like that. I'm so bad. But, I guess it depends on the subject matter and style I was going for in the comic. But, I guess I'd have to say George Perez. He was the comic book artist that I really gravitated towards when I first got into reading comics in the late 70s, early 80s. When I discovered George Perez, especially on New Teen Titans, it was like this light shone down from the heavens, and it was like, wow, this is what comic book art can be. And then, of course, I discovered other equally and perhaps even better artists since then. So, but if I'm going back to my comic book roots and why I love the medium, I would love to have George Perez and go from there and see what happens. I think when I was trying to figure out who I would choose for this answer, I was looking at my comic book database that I use and seeing how many comic books I have in my collection by various artists, and I think George Perez. I have more comic books in my collection drawn by him than almost any other artist, but that also includes reprints of things like the New Teen Titans trades that I have. But that regardless, that's just a testament to how much I enjoy Mr. Perez's art. Next question: when you tell people your height, do you lie or are you honest? See what I mean? Sarge, I never lie. I'm like George Washington. I never tell a lie. Well, unless it's so it doesn't hurt anybody's feelings. I don't count those as lies. But no, I'm honest about this. I'm proudly 6'1", and it's great being tall. So, ever read a comic in a blanket fort? You know what, Sarge? No, I have never done that. I think I vaguely recall reading a novel under the covers with a flashlight, but I trying to hold the blanket up with a light and holding the comic. I guess I'm just too stupid to figure out the mechanics of it. So no, I would need night vision goggles or 3 arms. So I don't have either of those, and that's not going to happen. Anyway, do you have a favorite spicy food? So I did ask when in my call for questions, I did say anything about comic books, podcasting, my personal life, and I did get some of these questions, obviously. So, favorite spicy food? Yes. But since I really like spicy food, I eat a lot of things. We in my family, we eat a lot of tacos, burritos. I love Indian curry. I don't know why I said curry. Chilies. I like eating spicy sushi. Put on a nice spicy sauce on top of sushi. Oh my God. And, more pedestrianly, I always throw on red pepper flakes to my pizza because I like the spice. Okay, back to comics. How much better is Rick Grayson than Dick Grayson? Sarge, don't make me reach through the interwebs and punch you. Best Nightwing villain? Well, okay, I'm just going to... Rather than putting in a lot of time to research this, I just thought of the first thing that came to mind, and that's Blockbuster. And I know technically he's not a Nightwing villain, but he became one. There was this arc in the Nightwing series where Blockbuster was basically Dick's Lex Luthor in Bloodhaven. And I also did a blog post about the death of Blockbuster and how that impacted Nightwing and his relationship, quote unquote, with that new Tarantula character. Anyway, that's why I chose Blockbuster. Next question. Would you believe if I told you I teamed up with Grayson when I was called Nightwing? Had to change my name to Nightguard after that. So, Sarge, this might be better if people had listened to George on the Meanwhile at the Podcast episodes where he talked about you as Nightguard. So people should check that out to find out the context here. But not only does Sarge go by Sergeant America, his other alias is Nightguard, and apparently Nightwing before that. And Nightguard, Nightwing, Nite, Nightwing. I hated you at first. I have to admit, did not like you in that story. But then you redeemed yourself. So there you go. So would I believe you? I guess I have to. All right. Sarge's penultimate question. I guess, no, this is his last question, but there's a bonus one. Best place to eat in your town? Well, Sarge, there is this wonderful restaurant called Lodgepole, which is run by this couple. They had this dream to open up this restaurant together, and the chef is amazing, and his wife is an amazing host, and she also does. I think she does some cooking too. I think maybe she does all the pastries and breads and stuff. Anyway, it is so good. My wife and I are celebrating our 30th anniversary. In fact, as of this recording, in just a few days, and we plan on having dinner. We're going to order out. We're not going there, but we're going to order some food from there because we love that place so much. All right. And then the bonus question, after Sarge sent me his questions, I said, anything from Private Peanut, which is, who is his daughter. And he told me once that she really enjoys the theme music to the show. So I asked if she had any questions, and she asks if you've ever put lyrics to the tune at the beginning of your show. So speaking of the show, or the theme, I may not have mentioned this in a very long time, but that was composed by my daughter. So she was a music major in college. She's always been interested in singing and performing, and I absolutely adored it when my daughter would either do dance performances or she would get up and sing. And unfortunately, she doesn't do either one of those anymore. She's busy with her job and raising a family, but I treasure those performances. But at one point, early on, as she was getting into creating her own music, she actually wrote a couple songs of her own and put them to music and performed them. I had asked her to, because I had bought her this music production software, I guess, and asked her to do a theme song for me for the show. And she did. She actually came up with a couple things, and I chose the one that I use. So, okay. So back to the question. If you ever put lyrics to the tune at the beginning of the show, Private Peanut, I asked my daughter to write lyrics one time, and she did not want to. FYI, that story may be apocryphal. So thank you, Sarge and Private Peanut, for those questions. I really appreciate that. The next set of questions comes from James. I mentioned James Blundell. So this is another personal question. How long have you been married? Well, I guess I just answered. I'm sorry, James. I jumped the gun on your question. But yeah, this year, 2020, is 30 years of marriage to my wife. And boy, it's kind of funny to think I've spent a third of that time podcasting. So, what comic got you hooked on comics is his next question. Not necessarily your first. Well, in this case, it's not my first, but I consider these comics my first, the beginning of my collecting, I guess, or my devotion to comic books. And I've talked about these before. I think my very first blog post on longboxreview.com was about these three. Or if it wasn't, it was very early on. But anyway, the first three that I got into, or that got me on this journey now, 40 some years later, and 10 years of podcasting later, are Amazing Spider-Man number 187, Marvel Tales number 98, and Avengers number 177. Those are the ones that got me hooked. And it's funny that I started out with some Marvel comics, but then shortly after that, I became a DC devotee. So, I mean, I still like Marvel, but DC was where it was at for me after that. Okay, next. In 10 years, is there a topic you wished you talked about sooner or at a specific point? I had to think about this one a lot, James. I guess what really came to mind first was I kind of wish I talked about Comicsgate and called it out sooner, I guess, because that's just, it's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Anyway, also, talked more about and featured, and I should do this now. There's no excuse for this, but feature comic books and done by people of color, by women, transgender folks. We have such a diverse set of comic book creators out there that may not necessarily get the attention that they deserve, and so I should make a more concerted effort to highlight those or spotlight those in some way. So. Also, I wish I had spotlighted more independent publisher books, I guess. I've been trying to do that here more recently. There's a lot more publishers too. It makes it simultaneously harder to do that because my money only goes so far. And but also there's no excuse because there's so many publishers out there, so many opportunities. So, final question from James. Have you returned to Nightwing yet? No. Once they shot him and he lost his memory and he became Rick, R-I-C, Rick, I haven't been back to the Nightwing title. I hear Dick is back or he's close to being back. I'm not sure, but I guess I'm kind of waiting for a good jump on point for that title because I miss Dick. Yeah, you can laugh. Go ahead. I miss Dick Grayson. All right. Next set of questions. Oh, no, the next one I have is a voicemail from Melanie J, who I spotlighted in the final retrosode. Again, I did mention this at the top of the show, but that conversation with Melanie was one of my absolute favorites, which is why I chose it for the retrosode. So here's Melanie with her question.
Hey, Eric. This is Melanie, or MJ Star Trail from Twitter, one of your guest hosts. So my question for you is, how have you, during this time of staying at home and quarantine, have you been drawing anything? And if so, what types of things have you been drawing? Happy anniversary. Bye.
Oh, Melanie, when I got your voicemail, I immediately felt guilty because no, I haven't really done anything. So I think what Melanie's getting at is I participated not this last time, but the time before with Inktober, and I did every day I did a drawing following the Inktober prompts. And I had a fun time doing it. Frustrating, but fun. Cause I hadn't, up until that point, I really hadn't drawn a whole lot. I used to draw a lot when I was younger. I had dreams of being a comic book, creating my own comic book and writing and drawing it, being a John Byrne or, only not a jerk. but producing my own comic book. That never came to be. I gravitated more towards the writing side, the words aspect of creativity. And I've even gotten away from that too. And I've talked about this, I've lamented about this a few times on the show, where it's like, oh, I need to get back to this. And then I don't. And boy, the disappointment I have in myself in that is sometimes overpowering. And it's easy to shove it aside and not deal with it than to actually sit down and create something, because creating is hard. But when you accomplish something, that rush, that feeling of accomplishment, that delight that you feel is wonderful. But I don't know why I don't gravitate towards feeling that way as opposed to feeling the other way. I need to get back. So basically, Melanie, I'm saying I need to get back to doing something creative. I to draw, to paint, to write. The only thing Melanie, that I have drawn since that Inktober time frame is for Hawkman Day last November. I decided I was going to try and draw a Hawkman and post it. And I I started drawing it and it's like, oh boy, this is really bad. So I didn't. And I kind of regret that. I wish I'd stuck with it. And no matter how crappy it was, just do it. But partly it was taking me too long and I had other things I had to do that day. But I never went back to it. So, no excuse. And then also, around last Christmas, we did a family painting party. This is actually the idea of my brother-in-law's wife, and they came up, and we had our families. Every Christmas time, our families get together and do this. And my daughter Brittany and her family were down for that time as well, and so we all got together. And I think after dinner, was it before dinner? I forget now. But we painted. We did Christmas themed acrylic on canvas paintings, and I drew a very simple, but I love it. A very simple light Christmas lights string of Christmas lights on this background. So I liked it. Anyway, my wife and I recently we still have a bunch of canvas, and she wants to do more of this, especially with the girls. I think mostly because of the girls, because they enjoy it, especially Madison. So we bought a bunch of paints about a month ago, but we haven't done anything with it. So maybe this month we'll get back to that. And then finally, I used to, like I said, I used to write a lot, and I have some superhero stories, short stories that I have posted to the blog. They're if you go to the contact feedback tab of the website, they're down at the bottom. There's some links to some stories I wrote back in, I think, 2005. I had a conversation on the show with Peter about this, and he encouraged me to go and read those stories on the show. And I've always intended to do that and just haven't gotten around to it, but I've never forgotten it. I think the intent there was that it would help spur me on to do more stories. And so again, I would love to get back to writing and, like I said, doing more creative things. Thanks for your question, Melanie. If I do get back to it anytime soon, it will be because of your question. So I appreciate I appreciate that question. The next set of questions come from Damien, Sleepy Reader 666, whom I have already mentioned. His first question is, how has doing a podcast for 10 years shaped the way you read comics or your comic book reading patterns? Let's see here. Well, I think because of my college work, my graduate college, or graduate university work, I've always had an eye towards review and critiquing things that I'm consuming. And also I'm just an opinionated a-hole who, can enjoy something for what it is. I have to point out the flaws in it too and say, well, that didn't work. Why did they do this? And that was a missed opportunity. Things like that. My wife loves it when I do that. So, when I'm reading comic books now, I always have an eye towards what I could say about it on the show or what I could post about it on the blog, instead of just enjoying the story. And I constantly have to remind myself, okay, stop thinking about this and just take it in. So that's probably the most prevalent thing about how podcasting has shaped the way I read comics. Second question, does podcasting feel like a permanent part of your life? Yes, or at least a huge part of my life. So when I'm not reading the material potentially to be spotlighted on the show, I'm planning for future shows. I'm recording like I am now. I'm editing, coordinating with others who are going to be on the show. It's kind of exhausting. There's a lot of work to put into this. And, and sometimes I have to not be with my family to do this, which has been a discussion point with my wife at times if I do too much of it. So I'm very cognizant of not doing too much of this stuff. And in fact, I will record on weekends where we don't have Maddie and Gabby with us, because they go every other weekend during the year. They go to the other house and stay. And then during the summer, they're gone for most of the summer. So and then I will also record even when the girls are here. I will record early in the mornings so as not to hopefully impact what we have planned as a family. So there is that. And then finally, Damien asks, can you picture yourself someday giving up new superhero comics altogether? Yes, maybe. Yes. I can see it, but I have a hard time believing that I would ever do that. They would have to get really bad. And I know some people out there probably going, are you blind? But no, I've always, even in the 90s when Vertigo was up and running and getting rave reviews, and other independent publishers were getting going and producing quality content, I never strayed away from superhero stuff because I love it. I love that genre. It's what got me into comics. And it's not that, I feel like I owe superhero comics anything. It's just that I continue to love to read stories about superheroes. That's just the bottom line. I will admit though, Damien, that I have thought about this recently, cutting back on superhero books and putting my money elsewhere. But like I said, I have a hard time with that because how much I love that genre, like I said. So maybe someday, maybe. All right. Who is next? Okay. Next up is a message from George from the Meanwhile at the Podcast show. So question 1, if Longbox Review provided your primary income, how would you structure your podcast empire? What type of shows would you create and how often would you release them? Well, George, I think I would do kind of what Daryl Taylor of the Taylor Network of Podcasts has done, and create the Longbox Review network of podcasts, and basically just have more focused shows. So I would probably release one episode a week and talk about the comics I'm reading week to week, do like specific focused reviews on certain series or miniseries or runs of comics. Maybe go back to previews. I don't know, but I'd have something new every week that I could do, in addition to the other shows that I am currently doing as well. So people would potentially get 4, 5, 6, 7. Maybe up to 7 shows a month. Maybe that's too much. So that would be, that's actually my plan for when I retire, is to do something like that. But we'll see, who knows what the future will hold in terms of what I'll be doing. Does someone really want to listen to a 60-some-year-old person talk about comics? I don't know. I think about those kind of things nowadays. So I already think I'm getting up there in age where maybe I shouldn't be doing this anymore. But I don't want to stop right now. So I will continue on, until I can't or won't. So, okay. Question number 2. So George asks, how do you negotiate your comic book reading / review and podcast time with your spouse? Whom, from what you've told us on the show, doesn't share your interest in any of this stuff. He adds, don't worry, you could be candid. She's not listening. And that's true. She's not. So, well, first of all, I don't usually have to negotiate anything with Kitra. She keeps the family calendar, so I'm already aware of what's going on in terms of our family activities and my responsibilities to whatever it is that we're going to be doing as a family. But what I do is check with her when, like, for example, George, when we are going to record together for an episode of your show, for example, I just simply check with her, and I try to give her about a week's or at most, or at least a few days advance notice, saying, "Hey, by the way, I'm going to do this." Double checking, is there anything that I'm not aware of that I would have to reschedule for? And that's especially true for any evening recordings, because those are more likely to be problematic, because I tend to want to record in the mornings on the weekends before anybody else gets up, because I get up really early, I wake up really early, and by 6 or 7 at the latest for weekend recording times that I've scheduled for myself, I'll do those, and then by the time I'm done, then people are starting to get up, and it doesn't interfere with anything for the weekend. So it works out pretty well that way. So thanks, George, for those questions. I appreciate that. Here's another voicemail. This is from Christopher Calloway of the Creator Talks podcast. He sent me this voicemail.
Eric, Chris from Creator Talks. Wow, 10 years of podcasting. You are a beast, sir. I don't know how you have done 10 years. That is quite the feat. So congratulations to you. And I have to say, I've learned so much listening to your podcast. I don't know much about DC compared to Marvel, but I've learned so much listening to your show. And I've read books that I probably would have never picked up, and I'm glad I did. And speaking of that, since I never read a lot of those books, and those were your formative comics, what books or what genre in comics have you not read that you want to get into, something that's kind of your blind spot, that when you can find the time, you want to dig into that stuff? Is there anything like that? Well, here's to another 10 years, Eric. Keep it up. It's a great show. I love it. Love the sound of your voice. I love what I've learned. The root of education is not bitter when you listen to Longbox Review. It's entertaining, it's fun, and there's a lot of passion in it, and that's what I like about it. Keep it up, sir. Thanks.
Oh, that dovetails quite nicely into what Damien was asking me. So, okay, so what stuff have I not read that I want to? I want to read more, I guess, slice of life comic books, more autobiographical stuff, more books that are essentially literary fiction based instead of fantasy or speculative fiction in that way. Oh, well, speaking of speculative fiction, more sci-fi speculative fiction comic books instead of horror. Horror seems to be the comics du jour right now, and horror is just not my thing. Oh, and manga. I have read so little. Like, I don't even think I've read one full book that is manga. So that is a huge gap in my comic book reading. I also know that the French or European comics scene, I have not read. I don't want to say any, but I'm blanking on what I've read. So I don't know those are styles or genres of comics, I guess the style will work, that I haven't gotten into. I've been mostly superhero American focused, I guess, for too long, and that needs to change. I mean, I just read within the last year Will Eisner's A Contract with God. I mean, come on. And, there are other books like that are my blind spots, things that I should have read by now and have not. So that's something I'm trying to rectify as well. I just bought Jason Lute's Berlin collection. I've heard for many years that is a fantastic story, so I'm looking forward to that. And there are others too. I got to get on that because who knows how much time I have left. Christopher, thank you for that question. That was great. And then next is Sean, Rising Star 50 on Twitter. How do you know when to pull the plug on a long-standing title you've been reading? Yes. So how do you decide what kind of books to jump onto? But I don't know. I was going to say, for those of us of a certain age, where we just buy and buy and buy for years and years and years. I don't know if age has anything to do with it, but maybe it's the comic book collector mentality. But I was like that. I was like, I would be on a title for years and not enjoying it, waiting for the creative teams to change or for the team to take a new direction that I did like, because mostly I loved the character. Nightwing, for example, right? There was a period of time there was like, I did not like the stories that they were telling. But I kept with it because he's my favorite character or superhero character in comics. And so I should be reading this book, right? But I have to give Marvel and DC a tip of the hat because of Marvel's production shenanigans, twice monthly shipping and rebooting number ones all the time and event. And also DC's New 52 initiative. Those things led me to, because there's so much content, and I like I said before, I only have so many dollars to spend on this stuff. It made it easier for me to drop things. And so when, like for example, the New 52 Nightwing book, it wasn't that great. I didn't like it all that much. And so after I think the first arc, or maybe the first two arcs of that book, I dropped it, even though it was Nightwing. And I did that a lot. So as soon as a book, so what is it about a book that makes me drop it? I'm not enjoying it. It's very simple. It very simply comes down to that. I'm not enjoying it. Either the story, the characterization, or the art. It used to be that I would forgive a lot of the art, but if the story sucked, I would drop a book. But now, if the art isn't up to par, that is a huge contributing factor to why I would drop a book. I have been wanting to drop Action Comics for a while now because of the artist that's on it at this point. So I'm actually looking for an end point. So I don't like to just drop a book in the middle of a story because I'm not quite there yet. I have to find a good dropping off point. Although I don't know why. Why am I wasting? I'm not paying $4 for it, but I'm wasting that money. So why I'm not really enjoying it. So why am I buying it? Great question, Sean. All right. Next up is my good buddy Travis, Mr. Oddfellow's Thoughts on YouTube, the Gaunt Man on Twitter. Travis asks me, is this the golden age of comics? Why or why not? Travis is bringing the big guns here, I see. So I guess if you consider the golden age of comics, obviously not in the terms of a time frame he's not referring to, but I kind of think of in terms of what kind of creative expression, explosion, just the general creativity of books. Is that an age? Is that a golden age where you get this, like I said, explosion of full of new ideas and characters? Maybe. I don't know that we're getting that from Marvel or DC. Maybe a little bit. Definitely from the independent publishers. There's lots of books from Image that I think are just fantastic. Aftershock is another good one. Scout has come out with some really interesting things recently. So yeah, that's where the maybe comes in, Travis. Unfortunately, while, I think if you'd asked me that question, like maybe even a year ago, I would definitely have said, yes, we are in a new golden age of comics. In fact, I may have even said that in an episode or two, maybe even in conversation with you, Travis. But maybe it's just because I'm in a funk because of what's going on in the world, pandemic, police brutality, all that crap. The world is going to hell, and I don't know. I have a few, like a half a dozen comics here that I got, since shipping has resumed. I've not read them. I'm not feeling that pull like I used to. It's like when I got new comics, it used to be when I got new comics, I would, as soon as possible, I would read them, and I would sit as long as I could, when I didn't have other demands on my time. And I would just read all these comics and just absorb them and soak them in. And I'm not doing that now. It's weird. Anyway, so next question. What is the single, I love this one. What is the single best issue of the Teen Titans? Okay, Travis. Do you mean the original Teen Titans, the second volume of Teen Titans, New Teen Titans, or what came after? Got to be specific here, man. But no, I consider, in my collection, in my long boxes, I have all of the Titans related stuff all together. Yeah, I don't put Teen Titans in the T's and New Teen Titans in the N's. They're all Titans books, even though their titles are maybe slightly different. And I put them in chronological order. So I consider them a long year's run of books together. So given that, I will say that I think the single best issue of Teen Titans is New Teen Titans number 38. I've long felt that this was probably one of the best superhero comic book issues published, let alone a Titans book. This is the Who is Donna Troy issue, where Dick Grayson, Robin, goes and figures out where Donna Troy came from, who her family was. And it was just a beautifully executed comic book that eventually, or at least I have always planned to do a spotlight on. So, and then, just for fun, I was thinking about, okay, in the original Teen Titans comic, what was my, well, he says single best issue, Travis did, but I guess I think of this as my favorite. And that's Teen Titans number 21 with Hawk and Dove. And it's that story where these aliens from another dimension are invading. And anyway, I really dig it. I think Neil Adams drew that one. But yeah, I like that one a lot. But I also like Hawk and Dove. I said something about Travis bringing the big guns. Here's another one. You are the new editor-in-chief of the comic book company of your choice. Which company is it, and what do you change? Well, I would choose DC because I love that collection of characters. Like I said, even though I started out with Marvel Comics, I quickly shifted over to DC. This is not to say that I think DC is in a worse spot than Marvel, because I buy hardly any Marvel. Why is that? I'm just not interested in much of what they're producing, whereas I am with DC. But I would choose DC because like I said, of the characters. So what would I do? Give the creators more freedom to express their ideas instead of handing down an editorial mandate. And I'm making a lot of assumptions here, I know. But it seems like editorial these days at the big two has more influence and power than the creators, or at least, the way that I perceive the stories that were coming out in the late 70s and the early to mid 80s did. And, it might also be the corporate overlords having an influence these days now too. That's causing things to be not as engaging, I guess. Anyway, I would like to give the creators more freedom to express themselves and see what sticks. Again, going back to the 80s, we got The Dark Knight Returns and we got Watchmen, sure, but we also got things like Blue Devil, Camelot 3000, Frank Miller's Ronin, Captain Carrot. I mean, we had all these different genres of comic books coming from DC that I would love to see them get back to. And, they tried. They, give kudos. They tried with the New 52, and the market would not bear it. So I guess retry a failed experiment, only do it differently. I don't know. That's a great question, Travis. And I'm sure you could answer this better than I can. Travis has that kind of a mind, and I'm a little more simplistic. So, but anyway, also, I guess, be less beholden to continuity, spotlight lesser known or popular characters, create new ones. Although I know that's problematic these days because creators don't want to hand over their original ideas to a corporation that will then profit on it and they won't. So I get that. And also, and I've said this before, I think, with Travis personally, and also maybe on the show or on Twitter. I don't, I'm 51, guys. My memory's not so great anymore. But this is my fantasy DC. Have, or publish a line of multiversity comics to celebrate the DC multiverse. They've got, at one point, I think they still do, they had 52 universes. So you could do an Earth 2 comic, or you could do a Earth X comic with the Nazis and, defeating the Nazis as the freedom fighters do. Because Nazis, no, punch a Nazi. Yeah. And maybe build lines of books around those worlds. And so for the person who's interested in the Justice Society, here you go. You got those stories over here. They don't have to be tied to the main universe. If you want, funny animal books, there you go. So I don't know. And also finally, continue to do those curated imprints they've been doing. They started with Gerard Way. Bendis is doing one right now. Sean Phillips is supposed to be doing one. I don't know if that's still on the table, but bring in these other voices and have them. Joe Hill is the other one right now, and have them curate these other creators doing works within that realm, that area. I guess I really dig that. So I guess they're already kind of doing what I want them to do. I just want to see it done, I guess, more with the mainline characters. So, great questions, Travis. You always make me think. And here we go. I think this is the penultimate. It is the penultimate question. This comes from Dan. On Twitter, he's DXO_Dan. Dan also writes for sites including Comic Crusaders, Nerdly, and Geekcast Radio. And I've been enjoying our back and forths on Twitter. Dan asks, what do you think are the most promising things about the comic book industry right now? Oh, that's a good question to follow up with Travis's. I guess there's a few things. The plethora of publishers. I mentioned this already, but how many publishers are out there? I know a lot of people are thinking, well, how much can the market bear? Well, the market will bear as much as it can. And right now it's pandemic aside, it was supporting a bunch of smaller publishers, which I think is great. I think Kickstarter and other patron sites provide more opportunities for creators to get their work out, and you as a consumer have a direct hand in that. So I think that's very interesting. I mean, self-publishing used to be like this dirty word, and now it's not, and I think that's great. And so if the only way that a creator or a set of creators can get this book out is to do that, then more power to them. I also think that there are more diverse voices. Not enough, mind you, and certainly not enough at the big two, DC. I'm looking at you. But regardless, I think there are more diverse voices in comic books these days. And the range of the genres and stories is broader than ever. Like I said, there are a bunch of things that I would like to read more of, and so they're available. And 40 years ago, it was pretty much just superhero stuff with a few smatterings of war and Western comics thrown in. And now there's this explosion of different things, and I love it. That's probably my most favorite thing about the last 40 years. The change in comic book in the comic book industry has been just the depth and breadth of available stories in comic books. So it's a wonderful medium, and I wish more people would indulge in it. Thanks, Dan, for that. That was a great follow, or that was a great question. Okay, and then finally, I have here a few questions. I thought this would be good to end on. This is from Mr. Peter Rios, podcaster extraordinaire, person I'm proud to be a co-host of the Legion Project, an all-around great guy. When CGS did its own 10-year anniversary celebration some years ago, I flew out to Pennsylvania for that. And because of our conversations on the show and over Twitter over the years with Peter, he was gracious enough to kind of host me or escort me through all that. And so not only did I attend that 10th anniversary show, but Peter introduced me to some of the CGSers, and then we had lunch afterwards. So it was great. Peter's a great guy. So Peter sent me an email with these questions. Is there anything about today's comic book culture that 10 years ago you did not see coming? Well, I hate to give this any more airtime, but Comicsgate, I would not, 30 years ago when I got into comics, I would never have thought that people who liked comic books, presumably like I did, could be so close-minded, racist, misogynistic. Yeah. That's not what comics are to me. That's not what comics are about to me. I can't believe someone who claims to like Batman or, insert your superhero character of choice thinks that anyone is lesser, whether it's a black person, another person of color, a woman, a transgender individual. I don't get it. I don't understand it, and I abhor it. Okay. Second question. In counter to that, is there anything about today's comic book culture that you're surprised we're still talking about 10 years later? Well, some of these I've already kind of answered, but lack of diversity and representation in the pages of the book and behind the scenes, the creators of the books. Why don't we have more of that? Why are, 95, I don't know what the percent, 95 to 98%, that's probably higher, of the characters we see in the books and those who create those are white men. There should be a whole lot less white men creators doing books than others. And then also, I'll just throw out here, we're still talking about this, the death of the industry. It seems to come up every few years. It's like, okay. Although I will admit that given the pandemic and the shutdowns, I honestly thought that this could mean, just like many service businesses, restaurants and maybe even retail stores and other things, they are at huge risk of shutting down. We've had a few places where I live in my small town that have shuttered their shops because they couldn't handle a shutdown, which is very unfortunate. But I feel for those owners and their families, but it's more important that the community at large is safe. Unfortunately, not enough people agree with that, I guess. So as we've seen the huge spikes in coronavirus cases across the nation, and now we're leading the world in that. Yay, America. But anyway, yeah, the death of the industry is a constant albatross, I guess, around the neck of the fans of books, I guess. That was a horrible analogy. Anyway, and then finally, Peter, and finally, for this episode, the final question, he says, or if you want something easier, I'm like, I'll take them all on. But this is the question. If the Greg Berlanti / CW universe of characters had to battle the Marvel Cinematic Universe cast of characters, who would win? Well, that's easy. The Berlanti-verse of characters. Take that, you Marvel zombies. And here's why. They have saved multiple universes multiple times now. What did the MCU characters do? Well, they just had to defeat Thanos. So there you go. Send your hate mail to longboxreview@gmail.com. All right. thank you, one and all, for those of you who sent these questions. I really appreciate the participation, the feedback. You made me think. I had to. There's some of these questions like, oh boy, how do I answer that one? Just I don't think about some of those things, and you made me do it, and that was a good thing. But ultimately, thank you, listener, for listening for 10 years. If you have, actually now I'm very curious. How many of you? I wish I could know this. You got to let me know. How many of you have listened all 10 years? How long have you listened, I guess, is the real question. Are you a new listener? Why are you a new listener? If you're an older listener, a long-time listener, I should say, why have you stuck around so long? What is it about the show that you like? What is it I can do more of, or what can I do that I haven't done that you would like to listen to? So I'd be very interested in hearing those things. And as always, as I always say, but I sincerely mean it every time I say it. But especially for this 10-year anniversary episode. Thank you for supporting the show, listening to the show, telling others about the show, leaving reviews of the show, sending me feedback, and for those who have co-hosted with me for being on the show. It's been a fantastic journey, and I am looking forward to what comes next, who comes next, and what the show turns into over time. I hope I don't continue to do the same thing over and over. I do want to innovate, experiment, try new things, read new things. And so I welcome you to join me on this journey as well. So, thanks for listening.